It's the Indie Writers Club with Cara, Claire and James Blatch. A place to relax, chat, learn and vent about life as an independent author. Get episode alerts and links at indiewritersclub.com. Now, here's Cara and James.
Welcome to the Indie Writers Club. I am Cara Claire.
And I'm James Blatch.
Hello, James Blatch. Long time no see.
Yes, I know. We recorded one yesterday, but no one needs to know that. In fact, hopefully this episode will go out in a couple of weeks' time because we'll do live from Aruba sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the Mastermind conference is just taking place in the Caribbean, as we say in the UK, or Caribbean.
It is. And I know a couple of people who are already on their way out there. So
yeah, and everyone else is going ages before and ages afterwards. And I'm basically going for the conference and leaving again afterwards.
I was going to say, because it's such a long way, quite a lot of people are going a few days before to do a bit of a writing, relaxing retreat thing. But you're just, all business, James Blatch.
All business. My first thing is I've got to get into America, which is not a guaranteed thing anymore.
It's not.
We'll see how that
goes. If you get
stuck
in some sort of detention centre, let me know.
I'm overnighting
I
in Miami.
I can't do anything to help you. I'll just...
Yeah, no. Well, you get me a lawyer. Disappointingly, the Dolphins aren't at home, so I can't go and see any baseball in Miami. Really annoying. They're away somewhere.
I thought we were talking about actual dolphins for a second there.
The Dolphins are always at home. Those Dolphins. Okay, the topic today is going to be character. We're going to get onto that very quickly so we don't annoy too many other people about how long we spend rambling. But I did notice a brilliant little clip of an author, which I sent you yesterday, dealing with bad reviews.
Yes.
And I thought it was great, so I sent it to you, and I think you quite liked it as well.
Yeah, I mean, she was basically saying they're none of your business.
Yeah. She's saying it's great. So that you have no right to be angry about someone. Someone else has 100% right to not like your book and to say so. That is their God-given right, and respect that.
Yeah.
And have nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with you.
Yeah, and I think that's so wise. It's so true. I think the more books you write, the more reviews you've had to deal with. We did that episode, didn't we, where we had to deal with our reviews. You do get used to it. You do get better at it. But still, there'll be that day where someone just says something and it really gets you, and you really feel like you want to message them back and go, you've misunderstood the entire point of the whole book. And it's like, people are allowed to not like things. It's like you're allowed to go to a restaurant and not enjoy your meal. And I think her point was, especially if they've paid for it, if they've paid for that book and they didn't enjoy it, they're allowed to say so.
Yes, that's how that transaction works. And And when do you need to take account of it? We did do that episode, so you can listen back on that. But it's repeated things that come up over and over again. One-off criticisms, one-off shouting into the void. But some people do online. Good for them. Who knows what's going on in their life? Just have nothing to do with it. It's got nothing to do with you. That was basically her point, which I rather liked.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a friend the other day who was really upset because a reader had tagged them in a terrible review. Is your printer printing?
It is.
Is that what that is?
It's printing our notes we're about to discuss.
I should say as well, if anyone thinks they can hear a ghost in my house, it's not a ghost. It's my son. He was supposed to be at a holiday activity camp today. And, life happened and he couldn't go. So he's upstairs in his room with his 3D printer, an iPad and a load of snacks. So we should be fine. But if you hear sort of banging and crashing around, or if we get interrupted, I'm sorry. But anyway, so this friend messaged me and she was really upset because the reader had tagged her in the review. And, first thing in the morning, you wake up, you open your TikTok, you check your socials, and you've been tagged in a review where they're absolutely tearing you apart. That's not a nice thing to do. And I remember, who's the author of The Hate You Give? Is it Angie Thomas? I forget her name. Super, super famous book, was turned into a movie. And she put a post on Instagram, this was several years ago, saying, you are absolutely entitled to hate my books. Go for it. Completely entitled to your opinion. Just please don't tag me in a bad review because I'm a human. Yeah. And she actually got slated. A lot of readers really kind of misinterpreted her message and thought she was saying, you can't leave a bad review. And that absolutely wasn't what she was saying. She was saying, we're humans, so we don't necessarily want to read that when we're not prepared. You might go, I'm going to read my bad reviews today and see what I can learn from them. You prepare yourself for it. You're mentally, a little bit buffered and you go in feeling strong. But if you're just having a really bad day, or it's just, you don't necessarily want to be confronted by it. So,
no, so don't do
so
that.
I think it goes both ways. Like, readers are 100% entitled to say whatever they like and to have that opinion, but just consider whether you really need to tag the author in it, is what I would say.
Definitely. In fact, any kind of negative comment, don't tag people in it. You know, I really hate an actor. Don't do at an actor on social media. It's just not fair. Okay, I just got one follow-up from, we talked about Scribe Shadow. So
yes, I was going to say, actually,
subscribe to Scribe Shadow, and it's quite hard to say that. And
subscribe to Scribe Shadow.
My first book translated into Francais, which is very exciting, and I got it proofread, so I used the credits again. So basically the 250,000 credits I started with are now down to about 5,000 I've got left. So that cost me $99 to get that done. There is an add-on option, and I'm not sure exactly what the deal is, but there's a guy called Max and his name's Maximilian, and he's at another company that does human copy editing in various languages. And I emailed him, and he kind of said, "Oh, welcome to Scribe Shadow." So I'm not sure whether it's his or he's just exactly what the relationship is. Anyway, they offer this service, and we were discussing how much it would be, because there's a whole thing here, isn't there? If I want to get my books translated full end, I would spend a couple of thousand and get them translated and copy edited and all the rest of it, which is what I did with my German books. If you're going to use Scribe Shadow, the whole point of that is it's £99 a month, and so you can get all your books done at dirt cheap and etc. So I asked him how much it was going to be, and it's coming at €1,100 to get a human to go through it. I'm not saying no to, because you need your book to be read, and he had, I said to him it's military aviation. He said no problem, we have specialists who will do that sort of thing, which was all great. And ultimately, I don't know, I thought I probably will, because German translations have gone so well for me. And it's still not bad, but it does put it into a different kind of bracket than just thinking it's £99 to get it done, which you can do. You can throw them up there, having gone through the first Claude and then the second proofread.
Yeah, it's such a difficult one, isn't it? Because for me, it's still, I wonder then, because we talked about if you fed it into Claude yourself and then put it through, then hired a human copy editor or whatever on Fiverr, or a human proofreader. Because would a proofreader be cheaper than a copy editor? I don't know. But for me, it would still be cost prohibitive to do it that way, because I've got 9 books in my series. Yes. So I'd still be talking about nearly €10,000 to translate an entire series into French, or even Italian, like anything that's not German. I don't know if I would sell in that market.
I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do all 3 books without going to Max. I'm going to launch them in France and monitor the reviews carefully. So I'll take one for the team here.
Yeah,
see what Scribe Shadow is like without.
Could you just find a French beta reader, for example? Like,
I'm having a day today.
You are having a day today.
Nothing's right. People not watching on YouTube don't know, but my glasses are not sitting right.
If you're not watching on YouTube, James is a mess this morning.
I am. And I'm having one of those days where as soon as you start doing something you need to concentrate on, your phone's going, somebody's messaging me, there's urgent problems at the cricket club. Well, I can't deal with that. I'm not very good at compartmentalizing. If there's something else needs doing, I'm very prone to stopping what I'm doing and doing something, which is a terrible way of working.
Well, not to gender stereotype, but you are a man when you are, historically.
Oh, you can't multitask.
Not a very good species for multitasking.
It's not multitasking, though. I can't deal with both things at the moment. That's not, that would require my full-time attention, and what these glasses driving me mad and the dog's driving me mad. Should we talk about character building?
We should, yeah, I think we should.
I'm going to take one.
Last note, actually, on the Scribe Shadow thing is perhaps you could see if you've got a reader who speaks French, because I know that I've got a reader who reads my books in English, but she's German, and she's contacted me before and said she absolutely loves them. If they ever come out in German translations, let her know. And I'm sure.
I'm going to do this as an experiment on behalf of everybody listening.
You're just
going to do it unfettered.
For the Indie Writers Club.
They've done the 2 stages inside Scribe Shadow, which is the translation, English to French, and then proof edited French to French, and I'm going to do the rest of the blurb and everything, which it gets done in there anyway. I'll do the cover myself, and I'm going to launch them in the next week or so, and then we'll just watch what happens. And if the first reviews come back saying, don't bother, these books are badly translated, we'll know. And if the reviews come back saying this was a gripping thriller, we'll know.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I'm happy for you to do it. I just have to sit back and watch.
Okay.
All right, let's talk about character. I'm not sure what spurred this on, actually. I think maybe because we've been talking about those TV shows and a couple of things.
So we are going to discuss 2 shows and whether they achieve the things they need to achieve, and that's Slow Horses and then Gladiator 2, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to record it, I think it's May 15th, something like that. So if you can watch it and you comment somewhere or just have a think about it, that episode will be more worthwhile for you. But let's talk about what goes into characters. This is, I mean, most of us are drafting at any one time, aren't we? And I'm both revising and drafting at the same time. And I think I have been inspired by some stuff I've watched recently. So I also watched The Residence, which is a sort of cozy mystery. And if you've seen that, set in the White House, a cozy mystery, murder mystery set in the White House one evening, and with a very strong main character, some very other strong characters. And I'm starting to finally believe people. And even though I've always kind of hidden behind the fact that thriller writers are all about story, thriller readers rather are all about story, I'm really starting to think, just invent fantastic characters and then build the story around them. Do it that way around, which is not the way I've been operating so far. So I'm starting to read a lot more on character building.
This is really interesting timing, actually, because I'm just starting to think about my next series, which I'm going to release next year, which is one of those, I was struggling for a long time to come up with an idea. And then when it came to me, I was so excited. I could barely even I was like, I need to talk to somebody about this. This is why hasn't anyone written this before? It's going to be amazing. It's like, I can see the whole thing. I'm so excited about it. I'm so desperate to write it that I'm allowing myself to write 200 words a day because I'm also finishing 2 other books at the same time. But anyway, so because I needed to talk to somebody about it, I've got a friend who isn't a writer, but I normally share story ideas. And historically, I've been quite kind of interested in his kind of critical take on things. But normally, when you share something, you kind of expect some good feedback first, because we're still sensitive, aren't we? We kind of expect yes, that's a great idea. I think he misjudged it slightly and thought I wanted to go straight in for the criticism. I sent a summary, basically. It wasn't a blurb because it's not at that point yet, but I kind of just brain dumped the idea and sent it over, and Colin was like, what did you think? And he went, well, I just feel like you're putting the idea above the characters. And I was like, I feel like I've been punched in the gut, because it was I think slightly it was because he'd got caught up on the structure of what I sent, because I was really excited about the premise. But then I really hate to give him any credit for this, but it did then make me kind of go, hang on a minute, put your ego aside, step back a little bit. Have I thought enough about these characters yet? I'm kind of diving in, desperate to start writing it, but I haven't actually sat there and really drilled down into these characters. And that is what's going to, the premise is fantastic. I'm confident in that. But the thing that will take it to being amazing and blowing up all over BookTok and everything else will be the characters. So this episode's come at a really interesting time, because I've kind of now gone back and I'm forcing myself to think about this stuff, which I don't usually do.
And it's not surprising we are story-led as writers. It is stories we think about. And someone says to you, have you got an idea for a story? No one ever says to you, you've got an idea for character.
Yeah, well, I think we might have mentioned this before, didn't we? We kind of said, this was very early on, and I don't know if it was one of the episodes that maybe we didn't even air it. We recorded a couple of tests before we started. We were talking about, if you're very naturally quite good at reading people and you find it quite easy to write, believable characters and characters that people resonate with, but you perhaps struggle a bit more with the structure and the story and stuff, you tend to focus more on the structure and the story when you're planning. And then vice versa. If you're somebody who very easily can see the way that the story is going to pan out, but you struggle a bit more with the characters, then maybe that's something that you spend more time on. And I do think that without really thinking about it, I tend to write quite believable, well-rounded characters. And I think we're both the same. We're quite good at reading people and interacting with people. So that kind of comes through in the writing. But I think that might be part of it, is that you naturally kind of dismiss the part that you kind of feel like you're good at. But that doesn't mean that actually you could be better at it if you spend more time thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, I think that it's quite hard to sort of change horses midstream, and I have been very story orientated. I am like you, excited about thinking about the character and building up around that. I'm trying to think, how's Hollywood operate? Because if you've always been told you need this elevator pitch. Boy invents a time machine, goes back to the future and splits up his parents before he's been born. Brilliant elevator pitch. Everyone's going to buy into that. But is the next question from the Hollywood executive, tell me about the boy? Who invented the time machine? Tell me who he is. And when they start to hear the characters, they start to think this mad professor and they're unlikely friends, and he has a dog called Einstein. Now I see the film. Or do they just think, no, that concept's enough, strong stories
No, I
enough?
think you're right. And I think it's the same in terms of hooks and things like that. So I think you can have an absolutely killer hook on TikTok in the top part of your blurb. You know how you kind of put that little bit in bold at the top of your blurb a lot of the time. That kind of functions similarly to the hooks that you use in social media marketing. And I think that's very similar. So you kind of have that elevator pitch, that one line hook that's going to grab people, but then they read down or they click to the product page and they want a bit more information. They want to know more.
That's when they're looking for the character.
Yeah,
that's when the opportunity of the character.
I think you hook them in with the premise, and you need to have like a little spark of an idea that's something different or something that's going to grab them. But then it's the character. Or even if it's not something different, actually, if you're writing a formulaic action thriller or crime thriller or romance, and you go, it's an enemies to lovers romance. Okay, great. Love enemies to lovers. But when you read a little bit further down, that's the bit that's going to make you buy this and not any other enemies to lovers book, is these particular characters.
Probably not a quirky story because the stories get rehashed and recycled in various, but it is something about the character and the situation. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So how do we build our character?
So this is something that I've always thought about. This is the one thing that I have. We're going to go through a couple of different things. I sent James notes. I was very, very proud of myself.
I'm impressed. Like homework. Now that we set homework as a podcast.
Well, usually he's sending me notes. So this is something that I have always started with, which is the core misbelief that your character has about themselves. And I can't remember where I read this term. Somebody will probably tell me. The shard of glass moment. I can't remember where that came from, which book. I don't think it's Save the Cat. But that really stuck with me from the first time I heard it. And it's something that I always think about for my character before I get started, is what is the thing that their misbelief, what have they got wrong about themselves? Yeah. What is it that they're going to have to get over the course of this story?
What I like about that is normally this is described as their wound, right? That's something for a thriller writer where I struggle a bit because the wounds, you tend to go down the kind of bereaved, lost their wife or lost their dad at an early age, and Maverick in Top Gun's dad died and left him sort of angry and wanting to fight a ghost all the time. And I find that fairly one-dimensional for thriller writers. And when you kind of run out of wounds, right, quite quickly, there's only so many. But misbelief, that's a much better way of looking at it. This person is going ahead in life with the wrong idea of what they are and what they're doing and what they need to do. I much prefer that. And I much prefer the end of the book, the moment of revelation, them realizing that they didn't need it anyway. They were already that person, or it wasn't what they wanted it to be. Or things are never going to be like that. You can't change people. That's a much better arc. So the misbelief for me is a much better way of describing that wound, the tradition we've called it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think instead of shard of glass, you can actually think of it as even lots of little shards of glass. Essentially, Kate Pickford did an amazing talk on this in Vegas in 2023, I think. And it felt a little bit like a therapy session. It honestly did, because I think she said at some point, some of you are probably going to think, what has this got to do with writing a book? We're here to talk about writing. And she was asking people who were brave enough to stand up and say what their core misbelief was about themselves. But when you start thinking about that about yourself, then you start realizing that's how you need to think about your characters in order to really make them relatable. And all of us have some kind of misbelief, and we go through phases in our lives because we have lots of different experiences. So if you're writing a series, for example, your character might kind of get over that initial thing, but something else will happen to give them another misbelief. And it usually, you can drill right down, and it usually comes down to something like, I'm not good enough, or I'm unlovable. Things like that, which might not have been caused from one big incident, like, my parents died when I was 6 months old, and then there was a car crash, and all these kind of quite dramatic things. It could literally be just, a case of real human experiences that have built up over time that have caused your character to believe a certain way about themselves. But we kind of then need to think about, so they need to have an internal misbelief, which is what they believe about themselves that is wrong, that they're going to learn over the course of the story. And then they need to have an external misbelief, which is what they believe about the world. So they might believe the world is a terrible place. The world, is cruel. Everyone, is going to abandon you at some point. So there's those two things. And I think if you start with that and really spend some time drilling down into that, that's the most important thing that you can do to kick yourself on this, because it's going to influence everything else.
Well, they could believe the opposite, that the world's a great place.
Yeah,
they're going to be treated really well, and things are going to work out.
Yeah, they could be very, it depends what way your story is going to go. If you need to break them down in order to then have them succeed at the end, they might need to realize that actually the world's not this sunny, wonderful place that you think it is. So it doesn't have to be, like you said, it doesn't have to be a negative thing. And there is actually the emotional wound thesaurus, which is the same people who did the emotional thesaurus, the physical attributes thesaurus. There's lots of them. They have an emotional wound thesaurus, which is pretty good if you're somebody who struggles with this, because we're not psychiatrists. We haven't studied human psychology. We're writers, so we kind of have an interest in it. But if you struggle with that, that's a great place to start, because you can think, okay, my character doesn't really trust people. Why might that be? You look it up in the thesaurus, and it will give you a bunch of things that might have happened. And then also it will tell you how that might play out in how they speak and how they interact with other people.
And this is a book you can buy, is it?
The Emotional Wound Thesaurus, I think. I'll find out the real title, and I'll give it to you so you can put it in the show notes.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about the arc then, and a kind of checklist you can create at the beginning before you start writing.
Yeah, so you need to know, and this, I think you need to plot it alongside your actual story. So you need to know who your character is at the beginning. So when you have in terms of Save the Cat, you have their normal world set up. So we usually start by thinking about that in terms of where they are physically and what their world looks like on a normal day in Act 1 before building up to the point where they go off into Act 2. But we need to do that for their emotions as well. So you need to think about where emotionally they are at the beginning of the story, so that you can think about where they're going to. And I start with the beginning. Night's just come to
That's
the
night.
I start with the beginning and then go to the end. So start with where they are at the beginning, and then you look at where you want them to be at the end. And then you can go into the middle and think about what turning points there are going to be. Because it's not just going to be a straight journey towards the end. That wouldn't be any fun. There's got to be ups and downs and things that are going to happen along the way that will, a couple of steps forward and then one step back sort of thing.
So that's when we talked about this before, about intertwining the character arc and the story. So the story effectively drives those character changing moments, but you plot out what needs to happen to the character first, and then kind of reverse engineer it with the story.
Yeah. So, in romance, a typical example would be at the beginning, the MMC, the male main character, believes he doesn't want to be with anyone, doesn't deserve to be with anybody. Everybody he ever falls in love with ends up getting hurt, so he just needs to be alone. And at the end of the book, you want him to realize that actually he can love people and he can be in a happy relationship so that they can have their happy ever after. But you can't just go straight from A to B. That is boring and unrealistic. So you've got to have, several moments where he starts to break down. He starts to question that misbelief. But then you need the kind of drama where actually the misbelief is probably reinforced for a bit to make it even harder to kind of fight through.
And I think if you're following Save the Cat, or most traditional story plotters will have this moment of complete desperation where you've closed every door off and your character's trapped, whether it's emotionally, whatever, in romance or probably in a cell in East Germany if it's a thriller. So everything, and they have no way out. That would be a coincidence, perfect coincidence of them also realizing they were absolutely right about their flaws.
Yeah,
they were right.
So that would probably
just before they finally get proved wrong and realize that's their darkest moment.
Yeah, the dark night of the soul is called the dark night of the soul because it's to do with their emotions as well as the actual action of what's happening in the story. So that's where they're at their lowest point. So they're, you can go at it two ways. You don't have to do an upward trajectory and then a downward trajectory, but most people kind of do upwards, and then something terrible happens to kind of slam them back down, and then they have their final, arc at the end where they go back up again.
Yeah, I mean, another way of doing it is, and I think in thrillers it works probably better to have this succession of things going wrong to the point so things get worse and worse and worse. They get more and more boxed in until eventually there's no way out. Apparently, no way out.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because romance, it tends to be up.
Yeah.
And then something bad, and then you overcome it.
That is a good observation, because watching those kind of rom-com films or happy films compared to thrillers, that is exactly right. You will watch a rom-com film and you know things are going to go wrong. They're getting on. So, I mean, Christmas, Jill and I, my wife and I at Christmas, we watch all the Hallmark Christmas movies, love them all. Get as many done as possible, like one a night of these cheesy, small town USA holiday film. And everything's so perfect, isn't it, for that first third? And there's going to be this dark secret's going to come out about one of them.
You're going to find out that he's the one that's come to buy the small town bakery, and
or
then it's all going to fall apart.
Or whatever. And whereas if you watch Jack Ryan or Jack Reacher, things progressively get worse. There's no moment of everything's going well, suddenly it's going to go wrong. Well, I suppose there could be in minute style, but generally speaking, it ramps up to this crescendo. That's a big major difference in the way that we do the character stuff in thriller.
Interesting, isn't it? So some other things to think about are what they think they want versus what they need. So they might think they just want to be left alone and never have to, be in a relationship ever again. But what they actually need is to overcome that wound, overcome that, misbelief, and learn that actually they can be happy. I don't know what the example would be in action.
Well, I think it might be from a character point of view with something like somebody who doesn't need any help. Works alone, works best alone, but actually does need help.
Yeah.
That's probably a good one of those, and that would work with my current character. Yeah.
So this is quite interesting, and this is something that I really am rubbish at thinking about this, which is the why now. Like, what's the thing that's making them go on this emotional journey? So not just the physical journey. What is making them go on this emotional journey at this time? Like, what's at stake if they don't learn this lesson about themselves? There's got to be something at stake. So in romance, it's the romance. If they don't learn to get over this misbelief, they're going to lose their person. They're not going to have their happy ever after. So I guess for you, if they don't learn that they need to accept some forms of help, then somebody dies, or the world isn't saved, or
yeah, generally speaking, I suppose, and that is the setup in my current book. You've got her wanting to get on because she's a woman in a men's environment and she's belittled constantly, but she's better than all the men. So we've got that set up anyway. So the opportunity of going off solo on an investigation, there's almost enough motivation there. But I think there's also the possibility in this case, I'm trying to think this through with her now.
Because they're kind of making so at that point at the end of Act 1, where they're stepping into their new situation, they're making a choice not just to go on the action part of the journey, but they're also making a choice to go on the emotional part of the journey, aren't they? So it's kind of thinking about why.
That's the emotional side, and the action part is, and generally with her, it's going to be, I mean, somebody's out for her because she's the only one who can unlock this case, and he doesn't want it unlocked. So there's a very near miss assassination, and she realizes she was targeted and can't even go back home or into the office, and she doesn't know who's after her. So yeah, that's a classic thriller thing where she's
literally forced to. She doesn't really have a choice.
No, there's a physical reason why she's now doing this.
Yeah. So I think the other thing, and this is something I learned from ghostwriting actually, because when you're ghostwriting, they give you a very strict kind of template, and they break down all of this stuff, because say I backed out of the project, another ghostwriter would have to be able to come in and look at the information about that character. So when I started ghostwriting, they give me breakdowns of the characters, and it includes things like their mannerisms. How do they speak? Is there any like turns of phrase that they use all the time? What kind of, do they wear a particular piece of jewelry? Do they have a tattoo? Do they have an object that's important to them? Kind of all these little things. And I think this is something actually that you can use ChatGPT or Claude for. It's great for that kind of thing. Even if you don't want ChatGPT to give you the ideas, you can ask, what kind of things do I need to think about for this character to make them more believable because if you've got that information in your head, even if you're not, physically referring to that document when you're writing, if you sat down and thought about it, then that's going to be there when you're writing that character for the rest of the book. And those are the things that, if you think, crime authors are great at this, the detectives that are so memorable, that are the reason that people read an entire crime series, like they're always so great at this. Like they have some little quirks, some little they're always, some of them would be quite a little bit cliched, like they're always smoking a particular brand of cigarette or something, but it's those little things that make that particular character stand out. And I could talk about slow horses here and the Gary Oldman character, but I'm not going to.
No, we'll save that to see whether that works or not. Spoiler alert, it does. Yes, okay, that's really good. So now I'm thinking a little bit more, already I'm thinking more three-dimensionally about my character than I was at the beginning, because I haven't done quite a lot. This is a first draft anyway, but I haven't done a lot of this stuff.
And I think if you're writing in multiple points of view, which I do, I've got 6, 7 points of view sometimes in a book, they all need to sound like different people in the way that they're talking. I write first person present. They all need to sound different. So you also need to have a little think about dialogue, because we talk differently. I'll have habits of saying things or a certain way that I laugh, or moving my hands when I speak, which you're adjusting your glasses because they're a little bit wonky on your face, but that's the sort of thing that makes you a 3D character in a book, not just a name and a description. And actually, I'm pretty rubbish at thinking about the way they look. And that probably is something that I need to put more emphasis on, because I don't ever really have a very strong idea of how my characters look.
No, I don't actually. I tend not to do descriptions. I'm reading a sci-fi book at the moment. I've actually quite enjoyed the descriptions of characters. It's made me think for the first time. I remember a discussion, it's a slight side note here, a discussion once about how you do your character description. Do you get them looking in the mirror at some point, or somebody comments on them? But actually, in the book I was reading last night, I didn't even notice until I went back over the passage. It simply just described, the narrator just simply described them. And I think there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah, there isn't. It's something that I find awkward, especially if I'm writing, first person present. Unless they are looking in a mirror, it just feels wrong to me to be like, and then I looked at my slightly oddly shaped nose and tied my auburn curly hair back. But I tend to not focus very much on like clothing and the way that people look, unless it's a really important thing like a scar or a tattoo or something like that. And nobody's ever commented that they want more of that. So no. I think because of the way I read, I tend to just like to make it up in my head when I'm reading and form my own picture of the person. So I tend to be quite sparse on those details. But if that's the sort of thing that you need, then put that into your little character template. And I know a lot of writers who will, not for using commercially or anything else, but they'll get Midjourney to generate a character image for them, or even a scene image. I've got a friend who pulls up a scene image on their second monitor display when they're going through a scene. So maybe if you struggle with what your character looks like, it might be a good idea to just put into Midjourney what you do know about them, let them generate some images, see which one feels right to you, and then just have that up while you're writing the scene, because then it might just bleed into what you're doing kind of more naturally.
Yeah, definitely.
Something I do want to say about emotions and characters and writing scenes that I've been doing with ChatGPT recently, because again, this is something, I think we talked about this briefly before, where I've really started paying more attention to my characters' emotional journeys, and it's made writing the story easier. But when you're dipping in and out, because I've got several different projects going on at the moment, it's sometimes hard to get back into the headspace. So what I've been doing is I actually copy and paste in the last chapter that I wrote, and then I'm asking ChatGPT to give me a bullet point breakdown of what are my characters feeling at the start of this new scene? What things do I need to be aware of? What's in their head at this particular moment? And what point of their journey are they at? And then it just gives me like a little bullet point thing, which I can have next to me to kick off that new scene, to make sure that I'm kind of like in the right headspace. Yes. And it's like those little tricks are the things that I think hopefully are going to make the kind of book that readers read and they're not sure why it's so good. And they're not sure why those characters are so amazing, because you've put in all these little details that aren't the sort of thing that's noticeable if they're done well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I should say that I think there's a slight echo in my voice on the line, which I don't know why. It's been one of those days.
I can't hear any echoes.
I can hear it, so I don't know if it's going to be on the end recording or not, but I just thought I'd throw that in. I should also say I have to go in about 10 minutes max.
I do too, because my son's been alone for...
We had a little technical at the beginning of this, so we're delayed in recording this. Do we want to pick this up as a part 2? How far through? Because we've got a bit more to discuss, haven't we?
We have got a bit more to discuss, but I think some of it is going to come up when we do the Slow Horses episode. So okay. What I could do actually is put this, I can format this a bit nicer and pop it into the Discord if anybody wants that as a kind of cheat sheet of stuff.
Send it out to our Patreon supporters and Discord, and I'll put it on anyone's on the email list as well. So if you want to get on the email list, indiewriters.com to get on there. Okay, good. So that was a good discussion. I'm feeling very motivated about my new book. I think I'm slowly, after, how long have I been writing now? 15 years of writing. Starting to understand that characters are more important than I led myself to believe about it. So that's my intention.
I'm looking forward to you coming back from Aruba with many, many words written.
Yes, I will.
No pressure.
No, I must get my revision done and then get
So I'll either see you when you're in Aruba, in which case, if we do that, I'm going to change my background. I'm going to put like a backdrop of a beach or something and wear a sun hat and pretend that I'm there. I'm hoping
I'll have a terrace or a balcony in my my hotel room. But we'll try and do it from Aruba, which is an author mastermind, and hopefully, it is a kind of what are those rules? Chatham House rules. You don't discuss outside the room.
Yeah, you don't talk about.
Hopefully there'll be points which we can discuss.
What happens in Aruba stays in Aruba.
Yeah, that sort of thing. All right, look, I've got to go to a cash and carry in Peterborough, such is my glamorous life, and rescue our cricket clubs.
I've got to go to a playground, so.
Yes, well, you'll have fun. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, see you soon.
Bye.
Support the podcast and get exclusive access by joining our Patreon. From just $1 an episode, you'll be invited to our Discord server, where the weekly discussion continues every day. And our 2 top tiers include a monthly live Q&A with James and Cara. Head to indiewritersclub.com/support. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. We'll see you next Friday.